All right, so we're going over ninth lit, the vocabulary. The quiz, by the way, is Tuesday. Me, no, I should say, C period and me and I made the decision, executive decision, you have nothing on Tuesday. Now you do. You have my quiz. However, you have, I think, biology Monday, have something Wednesday and Thursday. You're busy next week, and I was wondering why, and they reminded me that you have Friday off. So teachers, again, we're halfway through the quarter, so we got to get these things in. But you're going to be busy next week with biology, probably history and math. I think with the three, geometry and algebra. I was looking at it, but you didn't have anything Tuesday. I hated to put it there, but these are not hard, and we want to get it. I've been putting it off, so just know that you're going to be busy next week. So we'll start with Borish over here with Kimber. Matthew, you're not at all ready. You need to have these out. You need to be focused on it.
On manners, crude, insensitive, and then my sentence is, his crude, boorish humor scared most people away.
Yeah, it's really a good word. You don't see it very often. If you used it, people would wonder what you're talking about, but it means the same thing as crude, as you said, rude, coarse. That's a boorish person. So good sentence, good definition. How about dirt?
A short rather of a kind forming carried by Scottish Highlanders, and my sentence was that the Romans used dirt to stab someone.
Right, and you probably heard there's the basketball player, NBA basketball player named Dirk. Great first name. I actually knew somebody by the name of Dirk. It's not very often, but that's the second first name that I've heard out of reading literature this year. The other one was Thane, Thane. E.J. Highsall's father, I think it is, first name is Thane. So these are cool names. Yeah.
Oh, wait,
I'm not going anywhere.
I don't know why I would say that. The soldier died in war when he was struck with the dirt.
Sure. All right, solicitous, Abby.
Showing interest as you said.
Yes.
He had great solicitousness when his brother went to the hospital.
One more time.
He had great solicitousness when his brother went to the hospital.
Okay, it's an adjective, so you can't use it like that. You'd have to say he was very solicitous toward his brother when he went to the hospital. He showed a lot of care, concern for the brother. Solicitousness, I'm not sure what the noun would be. Solicity, I don't know. I have to look that up, but it is an adjective. Dirk is a noun, and boorish is an adjective. If you want someone who is a boor, B-O-O-R, is boorish. They're a rude, crude person. Yes, we'll hear.
He has been solicitous for his family's health.
Say it one more time.
He has been solicitous for his family's health.
Yeah, and it's solicitous. Like glib, Natalie.
Fluent and valuable, but insincere and shallow.
Okay, before you go on, fluent refers to what activity? If someone's fluent, what activity are they involved in?
Speaking.
So we're talking about spoken language here. If you're glib, you speak fluent in what?
And valuable.
V-A-U-L, okay. How do you use it?
His comment revealed glib.
Okay, glib is an adjective, so it's not a thing, it's an attitude or it's a description. Did you have a sentence for that?
Mine was, she was careful not to let the answer sound too good.
Because there's just one thing that you, Natalie, I think we need to add to that. That would be insincere. What was your definition?
It was fluent and valuable, but insincere and shallow.
All right. So if you say someone is glib, first of all, they like to talk. They're a smooth talker. They talk well, but they're insincere and they're shallow. So it's not really a compliment. If you say somebody was glib, hate the stereotype. You think about certain salesmen, like that smooth talking salesman that they're definitely, that stereotype you've probably seen in movies, TV. of a, glib speaker. That's because you're selling something, and you often, you kind of have suspicions about anybody that's selling you something, they have an ulterior motive. But you do need to add that part about insincere or shallow, and shallow. So you wouldn't be complimenting somebody that way, yeah.
Is this one, she was careful not to let her answer sound too glib?
Which sounds almost exactly like Fiona's, which was also very
I
good.
didn't- I wasn't even, I was like.
You weren't even what?
Right. How
You're
about,
trying to-
you need to hear Freddie's sentence.
Politicians need to do more than provide glib answers to questions.
See, in all those cases, you're not complimenting somebody, and so you need to know that, and it's an adjective. How about absolution,
What was that good?
Brian?
No.
A formal release from guilt, obligation, or punishment, or like repentance. The priest
It's the release from those things. So repentance is what the person does, absolution is what they receive from somebody else. You become repentant, because someone showed you absolution, or because you were repentant, they absolved you. So just that's kinda how that works. Go ahead.
The priest administers absolution to the man at the altar.
Right, that's what, the Catholic Church, it's something a priest is involved in and must do. Let's hear Freddie's sentence now.
Wait, my definition was, the act
Just
of.
the sentence.
Oh, wait, is this the right definition, the act of forgiving?
Yeah, I mean, if you listen, and you'd be able to tell that.
And then, like, we asked the priest to give us absolution from our sins.
Right.
Alright.
All right, discreet, Dave.
Discreet, having or showing good judgment in conduct and speech.
There are a lot of ways to say it. Now, don't get it confused with solicitous, but if you're careful, cautious in handling something, and you said wise, is that what was the word you used?
Having or showing good judgment in conduct and speech.
Yeah, good judgment, prudence, wisdom, you're being discreet. If I have something delicate to tell you, like, I don't wanna shout it out in front of the whole class, hey, I would discreetly bring you over here and tell you privately what I wanna tell you. That's because I'm showing concern, I'm showing wisdom, and privacy is part of that, yeah.
What about, intentionally unobtrusive, in my definition?
Say it one more time.
Intentionally unobtrusive.
Sure. You know what unobtrusive means?
Yeah.
If you walk by and I stick my foot out here, my foot is obtruding in the path, you might trip over it. So if you're obtruding, you're standing out. If you're unobtruding or unobtrusive, you're blending in. You're being, you're not being noticed. And it's very good often to be unobtrusive. Have we heard Freddie's sentence yet? I don't think so.
For which one?
Pay attention, Freddie. Discreet.
Oh, I just said, he was very discreet, only saying what was necessary in class.
All right, Felicity.
Boom, boom.
I have intense happiness. Intense happiness.
Yes.
And then, in a sense, could you say like felicity was spelled by all? Like,
Well,
I don't know.
if that's your sentence, I still don't know what felicity means.
yeah, like felicity was spelled by all when they got the puppy or something.
Okay.
Like happiness.
That's the idea. Have we heard Freddie's sentence
No,
yet?
you have not. I said we admire his felicity with his words.
All right, livery.
Special uniform worn by a servant or official.
Yes. All right, now, if any of you have a definition that involves horses, let's don't use that one. Not sure exactly why, what the connection is, but if you were my age and watched an old Western cowboy movie, every town in the Old West had a livery station. That's what they call it, same word. And it's where you get horses. You rent a horse, you buy a horse, you keep your horse there, they take care of it. We're talking about the uniform that Amazon Prime wears, the postal care, whatever uniform that is a livery, and it indicates you belong to a particular company, yes.
I had another definition, the portion of provisions especially given to servants.
Yeah, we won't use that one either, I've never heard that one. Not that it's wrong, it's just the way it's used in this, is different. How about alderman? Are we going this way, or are we going?
It's,
Yeah.
I said an elected member of a municipal council.
All Alright, if it's municipal, what is it?
Government, that's not it.
I'm up here.
Oh, I don't know, probably something like a governor or, something like that.
Yeah, but I said if it's a municipal, it is government, but what kind of government? You live in a municipality. It's not your state, it's not your country, it's not your county, it's really your city. So anything municipal, so aldermen are city councilmen. That's what we call ours in Greensboro. They could call them aldermen. They typically don't involve like state, there's a different name for that, or definitely national, we have congressmen and senators. But if you see alderman, you're talking about a local, like, city official. How'd you use it in the
I
Senate?
don't know if it's right, but I said, the man celebrated after he was elected, past he was elected as alderman.
Alderman, yeah, that's fine.
Is that right? Alright.
Abby, apothecary.
I have it's like a pharmacy or one who like prepares themselves drugs for medical purposes.
Good. Did you say it could be a pharmacy? Yeah, I thought about that. It could be the pharmacist, but apparently you could also use it as the pharmacy. You know, it's both the place and the person. How did you use it?
I said the storage village has an apothecary that's been there for a century.
Yeah, I mean, if you did read Romeo and Juliet last year, remember that's where Romeo went, in Mantua to get the drugs. He bought it from the apothecary, because the apothecary was poor, remember, and he knew the poor guy would sell it to him, it's illegal. You can't sell somebody poison to kill yourself. Yeah. Ready, it's your turn.
Sorry, I was just say the sentence. Oh, and then also Matthew's parents are apothecaries.
Your doctor.
Hey, go ahead.
I said the apothecary healed the man by giving him medicine.
All right, so choleric, where are we now? Yes.
Easily moved to often unreasonable or excessive anger.
Yeah, I couldn't hear that, you'd have to repeat it.
Easily moved to often unreasonable or excessive anger.
It's really being irritable, excessive, but also frequent. If you're a choleric, you're frequently angry. Somebody can easily set you off. And remember, the Reeve was choleric. And somebody last period remembered that there are 4 humors. Middle Ages believe that your body is made up of earth, air, fire, and water. And so the choleric, I don't remember which one that involved, but that was a term that would describe somebody that had a lot of the, maybe it was a fire, I don't know what it was, but it was a lot of that made up his anger. How'd you use it?
Watch out for the choleric librarian at the front desk.
Right. You don't wanna mess with a choleric librarian. How about prevarication?
I don't have my words here, I have them at home.
All right, how about it, Tim?
What is it?
Prevarication. I'm not making it up. I'm looking right at it.
It's after choleric and before ecclesiast. Yeah, the ace.
I know Freddie would be happy to do it.
Oh, sure.
More than happy.
I think I grabbed the wrong list of words out of my binder.
You wanna get it, Freddie?
I said the act of lying.
Yeah.
I said it was-
Hang on, Dave, what did you have?
Deviation from the truth, so.
Yeah, it is lying, it's kinda usually used when you're not saying something, did you do it? No, I didn't do it, when you really did it. It's more like, you talk your way around it, you might tell, yeah, I was there, but I didn't do anything, it's still a lie. So if you wanna say it's a lie, but it's kind of a specific kind of lie. How did you use it?
I said the man was willing to prevaricate in order to help his friend. Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
that's a verb, and that is correct. If you say prevaricate, prevarication's a noun. Ecclesiast is what'd you have, Kimberly?
That's the one that
All
I
right,
was
I
getting.
knew somebody couldn't find it. What'd you get, Zoe?
One who addresses the church or assembly of the faithful.
All right, so it's just briefly, it's someone who we'll say works in a church. He's probably a member of the staff, I think. it's, we don't use that term anymore. The word ecclesiast refers to the church, like Ecclesiastes in the Bible, that book. So, did you have a sentence, Zoe? Okay, yeah, just connected somehow to the church. How about scurrility and, okay, we need to know what that means, of course. Do you know what that means? Zoe's got it. Alright, crude, it's like being boorish, except, scurrility is a noun. So scurrilous is something that's, you said crude, coarse, vulgar. What did you get, Natalie, for scurrilous?
Oh, I had intending to damage reputation.
Alright, so all of that's true. It's, a boorish person is rude and crude. I think scurrilous is worse. You know, in the scale of things, it's worse to be scurrilous than boorish. Would you do poltroon?
An utter coward.
Yeah, simply a synonym for coward. How'd you use it?
The sergeant yelled, "Come on, you poltroons."
Yeah, I say it's a simple synonym, but most people know what the word coward means. Most people don't know what the word poltroon means. So, as a writer, it's your choice. What do I use? Well, you probably don't want to use poltroon because you're probably just showing off because people don't know what you mean. So even though words mean the same thing, they carry different weights of emphasis. And that's an old word. You wouldn't want to use an old word if you're talking to people today. If you're writing a story about somebody who lived a long time ago, they might use the word poltroon. So that's part of having your vocabulary high enough so that you know this is a good word, but it's not the appropriate place to use it. You have a final question?
Yeah, what was their sentence for, scurrility? Is it an adjective?
It's a noun. How did you have a sentence?
His scurrility nearly ruined their relationship.
Yeah, again, it's something that's vulgar or cheap. I think you could say that the miller in the Canterbury Tales was scurrilous, but that's not the word. His scurrility was known for his scurrility because of his dirty stories maybe, and it was scurrilous what the friar was trying to say about Sumner. There he goes again. Completing my sentence. Anyway, we will have this Tuesday. It's maybe a quick turnaround, only 15 words. You got a busy week. What I'd like for you to do is turn to your notebook, find some paper, some blank paper. You're going to be doing some writing. I am going to check these. So you can't check out because I want you to know this. I'm going to shift this around and ask you to listen to these notes about Shakespeare. Right, this isn't starting off very well today, so you need to decide if you want to stay in here and pay attention. Yeah, I'll take it. I tell you what, if you would just put it back there, I won't have to come around. You put it back there if you would, and I'll check them off after school. Yeah, where is it? Oh, it's over here. That's fine. I'll add it. Forgot about that.
As did I.
That's perfect. Abby, while you're up, you might turn those lights off for me.
I cannot move my legs today.
This is not the first time you've heard about Shakespeare. You studied him last year, maybe one other year. Hopefully you've had a little bit of Shakespeare. Next year you will study maybe Hamlet with Dr. Betzel. Your junior year you will study Shakespeare in the form of his poetry when you take AP. When you get to be a senior, you may read Macbeth. That's really...
We read Macbeth in fourth grade.
Fourth grade?
It was read to us by Mr. Johnson.
I remember nothing of that.
Fourth grade. Well, you'll read it again.
She was like dramatically reading, and I was like.
All right, so, I've got some notes for you.
Nothing of that.
What happened?
I can pretty much understand, given what the other class said, what you know, what you don't know. You probably remember some things about him. You've read a play by him. You're gonna read another one this year, probably, maybe 2 more. So by the time you leave high school, maybe you've read 4 plays. I've never read all 38. It's one of those bucket list things on my reading list. I've never read Henry VI. There are 3 parts to that. I mean, maybe I've read half. I don't even know if I've read half. That'd be 16, 17, 18, 19 plays. If I read 19 plays, somehow I doubt it. But I've read a lot. If you just, I don't read them for my pleasure. I should, because I'll never take another class, of Shakespeare more than likely. I've read in classes from high school to college to graduate school, now teaching, a pretty good number of them, maybe close to half. But it's one thing I'd like to finish. So, Henry V by Shakespeare is one of his most popular. All right, so as usual, you need to write down the questions. They're very useful when you study for the test. So we can knock some of these out right now if you know the answers to any of them. Anybody know when and where he was born? Stratford-on-Avon, England, and we'll give you the date in a minute. Do you know who the monarch was at the time?
Is this Mr. Willoughby's sideshow?
Yeah, I can.
What's that?
Elizabeth
Elizabeth I. She was the monarch. We now currently have Elizabeth II as the monarch. They weren't related to each other, I don't think. We know Shakespeare's reputation. You could probably tell me that already.
One of the top 3 greatest.
He's probably the greatest. Yeah, greatest English writer, greatest playwright in the world history. You'll learn about the Lord's Chamberlain's men. I've already told you he wrote 38 plays. We'll learn about the categories of the plays.
I remember we talked about, last year when we read Romeo and Juliet, about how people think that the Chamberlain was actually William Shakespeare, like that he wrote the plays, and he was just like, pretending, should not draw attention.
I think
to
it's
himself.
fun. I really do. I appreciate Mr. Willoughby bringing that up. It's kind of a fun, like the Bermuda Triangle and the Abominable Snowman and UFOs and all that. It's kind of one of those fun topics. And I think there was a real credible argument that Shakespeare didn't. And then I went to college, and the professors all laughed at that theory. And I understood why. In some ways it doesn't matter, but what if that were true? It would be the most colossal literary mystery ever if we had discovered that somebody else wrote the plays. I have a problem with that, though. There is a person named William Shakespeare. That's not him on the wall, but he might have looked. That's one of the theories. Is
His
that-
death mask is somewhere.
Yeah, that's not him. It's somebody, but it's not him. We don't know what he looked like. Why not? That's the question. It wasn't that long ago, 400 years ago. There's no cameras, but you think that'd have been artwork or famous, I just think it's an interesting thing to consider. But the problem I have is, why would Shakespeare, the guy we're gonna learn about, let somebody else write his plays for him and take credit for it? You think at some point somebody, he would say, listen, I didn't write them, I don't want to take credit. Or the other guy, was supposedly a nobleman, and noblemen weren't supposed to write plays or anything like that, so that's why he had to hide under an assumed name. But it's fun. But what I'm going to tell you about Shakespeare is what we know about him. Now, the funny question is, did this guy write his own plays? And I think the onus of the argument is on the people that would say he didn't. So, anyway, one of the things you study when you study Shakespeare is you study the Elizabethan stage, the Elizabethan theater, the Elizabethan art form of drama. And so we will do a little bit of that too. One of which is, like, even before Shakespeare, plays have to be, you can read a book anywhere. You can't perform a play anywhere. They have to be, now a lot of different places you can perform a play. We've been performing plays in everything but a theater for 25 years. We've never had a theater. We've had a mobile unit, we've had a gymnasium, we've had a lunchroom. We've performed plays, and that's essentially the answer to the question. Where did they perform them before the theaters were built? And they did what we do. Just find the biggest open space indoors you can find, and sometimes outdoors, and that's where you put them up. You don't have, but you can't just put them anywhere. You have to have a big space for them in. So there's some specific places that we'll mention. By the way, if we ever can pay off and finish that building over there, which we're still not finished, there's still rooms over there we don't use, floors that haven't been completed. Whenever that gets done, I think they'll turn their, and of course we just had a year-long pandemic and people lost their jobs. It's not the time to be raising money for new buildings, but I think a theater is the next thing on the list. And I think before not too long, I think there'll be another building over there with a theater in it. That's the priority, at least as it has been. So we'll learn more about the Globe Theater. Again, the thing that Shakespeare stands out is his language. I don't know if you like language. You love language, because you use it all the time. You text, you talk, you love language. But some of the best language ever written is Shakespeare. The way he used words. He created 2,000 words. I mean, think about it. The English language wasn't big enough for him. He's bigger than the language. So he has to create words in order to express his thoughts, because the words before that didn't exist. Now granted, he took words like majesty and turned it into majestic. You say, well, does that count? Well, no one else had done it, and people are still doing it. Words are still being created. It's just that Shakespeare's words are still being used. A lot of the slang and that you hear today is just that. It's slang. It won't be popular when your children grow up. They won't know what we used to say this, and they wouldn't understand what you're talking about. But with Shakespeare, the words remain.
What was the slang when you were a child?
What up?
I mean, I don't even know. When you're a child, you don't distinguish between what's slang and what's proper English. You just, we used to say that instead of cool or something, we would say neat, N-E-A-T. That's something I've come out of my mouth. To hear anybody say, that's neat, I mean, that's whatever the word cool means, that's what the word neat means. And if you ever hear anybody say it, they're probably about my age, and I just can't think of too many other words. If you study the 60s, you'll see a lot of that. All right, we'll focus on Henry V, of course, this particular play, and we'll end by talking about, again, the Shakespearean theater, the stage, all of that. So when you study Shakespeare, you're studying more than just the written story on the page. Since some of you are finishing up, I found this list. Actually, Mr. Feeney, he he's kind of a Renaissance man, in my opinion. He loves things more than just his field of study, science, chemistry. And he's always been interested in other areas, and so he often sends me, if he sees things about words or Shakespeare, here's a whole list of words and phrases invented by Shakespeare. Let me just read through the list. If something you do gets you in a pickle, you may not even heard that expression, but I've heard it. That's from Shakespeare, in a pickle. If your friends are so funny they keep you in stitches, that's from Shakespeare, in stitches. If your guests eat you out of house and home, that's from Shakespeare. If somebody is a laughing stock, that's from Mary Wobbs of Windsor by Shakespeare. That's a sorry sight, that's from Macbeth. If somebody is as dead as a doornail, that's Henry VI. If you like fair play, that's from The Tempest. If you wear your heart upon your sleeve, I don't know if you've heard that expression, that's from Othello. If something happens so quickly it's in the twinkling of an eye, that's The Merchant of Venice. Mum's the word. I used to hear my mom say that. I won't say a word about it. Mum's the word. That's from Henry VI. If something's neither here nor there, meaning that it's not relevant, that's neither here nor there. That's from Othello. If you send somebody packing, that's from Henry IV. If something sets your teeth on edge, that's Henry IV. If there's method in your madness, that's from Hamlet. If something's too much of a good thing, that's from As You Like It. And if something vanishes into thin air, that's Othello. We believe there are 2,000 phrases like that and words that Shakespeare added to the language. Yes.
Are you sorry?
Yeah. All right, Shakespeare's lines, we're going to divide it in his Stratford years, his London years, his post, you better go quickly, his post-London years. All right, so he was born April 23rd, 1564. He died April 23rd, 1616. A lot of people think that's made up. Most people don't die on your date of birth, but it certainly could happen. You've got 365 days to die on. It could be the same day that you were born on. That's unusual, but that's no indication it was made up. Stratford, his father was a local, important, respectable man. Bailiff means he was like a sheriff's deputy, as you know, we've studied him. However, he spent his professional life, 20 years in London, as a playwright, a poet, and an actor. So he not only wrote plays, he acted in plays, probably directed plays, and he was the businessman who, managed the plays. He's considered the world's greatest playwright. He's he is England's greatest writer. And that list that you're familiar with is right up there. So again, we'll look at his life from those years in Stratford, the years in London, and then their years afterwards. He did all this basically in 20 years. He became the world's greatest playwright, maybe the world's greatest writer in 20 years. I've been teaching 45 years. He only did that work for 20. He was a genius. He accomplished all of what he accomplished in his life in about 20 years. Yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking, what was the first teaching job that you had?
Well, Page High School. I've only had two. Page High School and Caldwell Academy. 30 years. I went to high school there. By the way, if anybody's interested, the first high school football game of the year is supposed to be August 20th of last year. It's going to be Friday night. So Friday Night Fever returns. It's just weird. They're playing high school football in March, practically.
Wait, they have their fall sports now?
Well, the football, I don't know about any of the others, but
Can people watch?
that I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. They're letting people into college games, even basketball, but, you know, like 20%. Some of the games are full, like you go to Northwest or someplace like that, they were always, a lot of people at those games, at the stadium. Grimsley's sometimes pretty sparse.
I went to Page for like 3 days this year.
Wow.
Best 3 days of your life, right?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
I didn't do anything, but.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna move on. Can I move on? Okay, you're not ready. Again, one of the arguments that Shakespeare wasn't really Shakespeare was he didn't go to college. We've already had that discussion. You know, if you're a genius, you don't have to go to college, but you can learn on your own. We're trying to get you to be, you don't have to be a genius to learn on your own, but you can learn the right skills, how to, and you have to want it, so. Yeah.
I was just, asking.
All right, can I move on?
Yeah, you did.
All right, so those Stratford years, the first years of his life, we don't know when he left. You'll find out later that somewhere in the early 1590s, he's born 1564, so he would have been maybe in his late 20s when he went to London, which, you know, that's a pretty young person. But we don't know that he did this. Like, his name doesn't appear on the local grammar school, and grammar doesn't mean like 1st through 5th or K through 5th. It was older students went to grammar school. They learned the grammar of subjects, which is why we call that the grammar school. It's the basics. They learned the foundations of math, science, and reading and so forth. But the foundations in 1564 included the great classic writers that we read. You read Virgil. You read the Bible. Of course, Shakespeare is now one of those classic writers. But Ovid and Plutarch, Plutarch wrote, you know, I think he's Roman. Is he Roman? I think he was. And he wrote about the great Greeks and the great Romans. So he knew all that. He read all that. We talked about being master of the English language. He probably attended that school that was pretty well known, the King's School. And he would also study the catechisms, which, you know, the church creates to teach you scripture, Latin grammar, literature, history, rhetoric. He probably wrote Latin and Latin orations and declamations, and he probably even studied some Greek. Here, Mr. Sullivan, I think, has taught individual students some Greek, because they wanted, if you have to become a pastor, you would need to study Greek. I would love to be able to read the Bible in Greek. I don't know if that's, I mean, it's certainly not necessary. I wonder if it would, I don't know. I mean, my chances of doing that in this hard work, I'm sure, are probably nil, but I'd love to be able to do that. Because now you're dealing directly with the original words, not words translated by somebody else. But he would have done that. So he had a pretty good background, probably better than, dare I say, most college graduates in America have never read Virgil, Ovid, Plutarch, and probably even the Bible. Talking about college students. So this education that he had up until he was probably his late teens was better than a lot of college educations are today. He married Anne Hathaway. She was 18, and they had a family. All these are facts. We know these names. We know these. These are facts, not that he studied them, but he probably studied them. And we know that he did, where he was born and his parents and his wife. Something urged him to move to London. so probably in his late 20s. I don't know how old he was when he married. She was just a teenager. Oh, that's not all that young when you think of, say, Mary in the Bible was 14 probably when she married.
Wasn't Juliet 13?
And Juliet was 13, 14 years old, right? So Shakespeare made her, she's fictitious, but he made her into a young teenage girl. When your life expectancy is low, Shakespeare died at 56. When, you know, that's, I was 56, 14 years ago, almost, 13 years ago. So when your life expectancy is in your 60s or 50s, then you marry earlier. That makes sense to me. By the way, I pulled out his book. In a minute, we get that far. We'll talk about what he wrote. I think the first books that he wrote were his histories. And of those, I think the Henry VI books, there were 3 of them, 3 plays, were his first plays. I think that's true. Anyway, it wouldn't be too early in your life to develop a library. And all the books that you get, with the exception of the 2 that I've taken up, are yours. They're classics. I'd hang on to them. And I would build on them, like finding books about Shakespeare anytime you have an opportunity. And you can get the greatest books ever written cheap. Like I told you, I have a $8 version of Divine Comedy over here. It's got all 3 books of Divine Comedy. Got it at Barnes & Noble. It's a huge book, $8. You can get the current bestseller for $25. And 2 years from now, no one will ever read it. Here's a book that's been around for 700 years, and you can get it for $8. It's just funny how we value things. The things of greatest value sometimes, they practically give them away. In fact, they can't give them away. People don't want them. So he goes to London. We know this because his name begins to appear in a London newspaper, I think as early as 1592. He was being criticized because he wasn't a college graduate. If you think about it, the whole argument that Shakespeare didn't write those plays, one of the arguments is that he didn't go to college. Well, that was the same argument in 1592. They were criticizing him for not going to college. How could a non-college graduate write this stuff? That's because they don't take into consideration genius. That's not something you just throw around. There's not that many of them. So he stays there 20 years, and he's criticized for writing plays, or at least writing, plays, as early as that. So he must have started writing, around the early 1590s, or maybe even a little earlier. He published 2 long poems. I've never read them. It's on my bucket list. I'll probably never take a class again on Shakespeare, but I would, nothing's keeping me from reading more Shakespeare. So Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece. These are 2 long poems that I would like to read. Published them in 1593. Hello? Yes.
Sure.
Natalie, that was you. All right, so we do know that his plays, his history plays, were written in the 1590s. And they include, and also in that list were several comedies and several tragedies. So that is actually the division of his plays. He wrote comedies, tragedies, and histories. And then he wrote some poems. He wrote 150 sonnets. He wrote 38 plays. That's a lot of plays. Each one of them could be in a book. You could think if someone wrote 38 books in their life, that would be pretty impressive. Shakespeare wrote 38 books. I don't know how they were published, but probably not until after. So he spends 20 years in London working. have time for a couple more. And I will give you credit for this after